Your fish is scared right now, not because the water is dirty, not because it's sick, because of something you did this morning without even thinking about it. There are 5 fears living inside your fish at this very moment, fears that researchers have actually measured in brain tissue, in stress hormones, in immune cells, and almost every single one of them was caused by a normal, well-meaning fish owner doing what they thought was right. One of these will genuinely change how you set up your tank. And one of them? It doesn't just affect the fish you have now. It affects fish you haven't even bought yet. We're going to cover all 5, starting with the one that surprised researchers the most. Number 1, the fear of endless light. Here's something most fish owners never think about. That beautiful blue LED strip you leave on all night because it looks cool? Your fish experiences it the way you would experience someone shining a flashlight in your face every time you tried to fall asleep, permanently. Researchers studying zebrafish, one of the most well-studied animals in behavioral neuroscience, found that exposure to artificial blue-rich light at night triggers a measurable anxiety response almost immediately. The fish swim less. They hug the walls of the tank. They school tighter, pressing against each other in a way that scientists call thigmotaxis, wall-seeking behavior, which is a documented sign of fear and threat perception in fish. But here's what makes this even more unsettling. It's not just about the fish that's alive right now in your tank. When mother zebrafish were exposed to bright light at night during breeding, their larvae, their children who had never experienced artificial night lighting themselves, later showed reduced movement and heightened stress responses. The fear was passed down, not through genetics in the traditional sense, but through what researchers call transgenerational stress effects. Your lighting choices today are quietly shaping the nervous system of fish that don't exist yet. So when you walk into your living room tonight and that tank is glowing blue at midnight, your fish isn't admiring the ambiance. It's stuck in a low-grade panic that never fully switches off. The fix is simple. Give your fish a real dark period, 8 to 10 hours of actual darkness, not dim, dark. That one change alone can reverse much of the anxiety behavior researchers documented within days. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the second fear isn't about too much light. It's about how fast the light changes. Number 2, the fear of the sudden switch. You walk into the room in the morning, you flip on the lights. Maybe the room light, maybe the tank light, maybe both at the same time. It takes about 2 seconds. For you, it's nothing. For your fish, it is physiologically closer to a predator strike than you might ever imagine. Fish eyes adapt to light changes much more slowly than human eyes do. When you flip that switch, your fish goes from darkness to full illumination in an instant, and its visual system simply cannot process that fast. The result is a startle response. Erratic swimming, rapid direction changes, a spike in stress hormones. Aquarium researchers have explicitly documented sudden light transitions, abrupt on and off switches, rapid intensity changes, as triggers for panic responses in fish, even when the total amount of light during the day is completely normal. The problem isn't the brightness, it's the speed of the change, and it gets compounded. If your room light flickers, if someone walks past a lamp, if a TV flashes, if the curtains move and let in a pulse of sunlight, every single one of those micro events hits your fish's nervous system like a small alarm. Researchers working with chronic stress models in zebrafish actually use dark-to-light transitions as a standardized stress induction tool in the lab. They use it because it reliably produces anxiety. And you might be doing a version of it dozens of times a day without realizing it. The owner implication here is direct. Never switch your tank light on before the room is already lit. Let ambient light build first. Use a timer on your tank light so it comes on gradually and predictably. Your fish doesn't need drama, it needs rhythm. Now, before we get to the one that's genuinely going to shock you, and I mean that because it involves something almost every fish owner does and thinks is harmless, let me quickly mention something exciting, This channel is working toward 1,000 subscribers, and to celebrate when we hit that milestone, I'm doing $100 in Amazon gift card giveaways. One winner, picked randomly from subscribers who comment on the channel. So if you want to be in the running, subscribe and drop a comment. I'll announce the winner once we hit that number. Now, back to your fish, because this next one is the reason your fish might be living with a permanent enemy it can never escape. Number 3. The fear of the rival who never leaves. This is the one most people don't expect, and it doesn't require a second fish. It doesn't require any fish at all. It just requires a reflective surface. Researchers use what's called a mirror assay to study aggression in fish. They place a mirror near a fish and observe its behavior. What they found is that zebrafish and many other species do not recognize themselves in a mirror. They see a rival. They respond with sustained aggression, biting at the glass, flaring their fins, circling, lingering near the reflection for extended periods. The behavior doesn't stop because the rival never backs down. It never retreats. It matches every move perfectly, which in fish social language signals an extremely dominant, extremely threatening opponent. Now think about your tank, reflective backgrounds, shiny equipment, the glass itself, viewed from certain angles and certain lighting. If any of these surfaces are creating a reflection your fish can see clearly, your fish may be spending hours every single day in a state of sustained territorial aggression, burning energy, elevating cortisol, and getting absolutely nowhere. And here's the layer that makes this genuinely disturbing. Studies on fish social stress show that chronic conflict, the kind where there's no resolution, no escape, no winner, is one of the most damaging psychological states a fish can experience. Not a single big trauma. An unending low-grade war. The fish that looks like it's active and alert near the glass might not be curious. It might be exhausted and furious. Check your tank from your fish's eye level. Look for reflections. A matte black background instead of a glossy one can eliminate this entirely. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the fourth fear isn't about a fake rival. It's about a real one. And the damage it does to fish, you can't even see suffering. Number 4, the fear of being the permanent underdog. Every community tank has a social hierarchy. That's not a problem in itself. It's natural. What becomes a problem is what happens to the fish at the bottom of that hierarchy when there is literally nowhere to go. Research on fish dominance hierarchies is clear and consistent. Dominant and subordinate fish are biologically different animals, even when they're the same species, the same age, and living in the same water. Subordinate fish show chronically elevated stress hormones. Their immune function is measurably compromised. They are more vulnerable to disease. They eat less efficiently. And in a tank, unlike in a river or a lake, the subordinate fish cannot leave. It cannot find a new territory. It cannot put distance between itself and the fish that dominates it. One study framework that appears repeatedly in fish stress research is what scientists call chronic unpredictable stress, CUS, where a series of mild, random negative events over weeks produces stable anxiety-like behavior, serotonin deficits, and neuroinflammation. Not one big trauma, just an accumulation of small ones. For a subordinate fish in a community tank, every feeding time is a small trauma. Every time the dominant fish swims past is a small trauma. Every day is another day of being unable to escape. And here's the part that makes owners feel the worst when they hear it. The fish that looks lazy or dull or just resting at the bottom might not be relaxed. Research on prolonged social stress in zebrafish shows that motor retardation, reduced movement, reduced exploration, is one of the primary behavioral signatures of deep chronic stress. A fish that barely moves while its cortisol and inflammatory markers are elevated is not a calm fish. It is a fish that has given up. So when you look at your tank and you see one fish that's always hiding, always at the back, always getting chased away from food, that fish is not fine. It is living in a state of continuous psychological pressure that is actively reshaping its brain and immune system. This is the one, the one that's going to stick with you. Number 5, the fear that lives in the unpredictability of you. Everything we've talked about so far, the light, the reflections, the social stress, those are environmental. But this last fear is different. This one is about your behavior, your routine, the small things you do every day that feel random to you, but feel like chaos to your fish. Researchers studying chronic unpredictable stress in zebrafish use a very specific protocol. They expose fish to a rotating schedule of mild stressors, handling, tank transfers, brief confinement, changes in water level, altered feeding times. No single event is severe, but the unpredictability itself is the stressor. After weeks of this, the fish show anxiety-like behavior, reduced locomotion, elevated cortisol, increased neuroinflammation, and measurably higher dendritic spine density in the telencephalon, meaning the structure of their brain has literally changed in response to chronic uncertainty. Now think about what a typical week looks like for your fish. You feed at 7 on Monday, then forget until noon on Wednesday. You tap the glass when you walk by because it's fun to watch them react. You do a water change on Saturday, then move the decorations around because you wanted a new look. You have guests over and 5 different people walk up to the glass, lean in close and stare. Your fish sees a looming giant silhouette, which in open field anxiety tests causes zebrafish to freeze, sink to the bottom, and press against the walls. And then another, and then another. None of these things feel harmful, but to your fish, each one is a small, unpredictable event in a world where nothing is ever quite the same 2 days in a row. And the research is explicit. It is the unpredictability, not the severity, that drives chronic stress. A fish that experiences one big scare and then has a stable, predictable environment will recover. A fish that experiences dozens of small surprises every week, forever, will not. The fix is less exciting than any product you could buy. It's a schedule. Feed at the same time every day. Use a timer for your lights. Move slowly near the tank. Warn your guests not to tap the glass. Give your fish the one thing it cannot give itself, the ability to predict what comes next. Because here's what all 5 of these fears have in common. They're not caused by neglect. They're caused by not knowing. The fish owner who leaves the blue LEDs on all night loves their fish. The person who taps the glass is delighted by their fish. The one who rearranges the decorations every few weeks is trying to enrich their fish's environment. None of them are doing anything wrong on purpose. But your fish doesn't know your intentions. It only knows what it experiences. And what it experiences, the endless light, the sudden switches, the phantom rival in the glass, the social pressure from a tank mate it can never escape, the low-grade chaos of an unpredictable week. Those experiences are real. They show up in its cortisol levels. They show up in its immune cells. They show up in the literal structure of its brain. You're not just keeping a fish. You're the entire world to that animal. Every light, every sound, every schedule, every reflection, all of it comes from you. And now that you know, you can make that world feel a little safer. If this changed how you think about your tank, subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it keeps this kind of research-backed content coming. And if you want a chance at that $100 Amazon gift card giveaway when we hit 1,000 subscribers, drop a comment below.